Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, just checking. Okay, so what I'd like to do is to give a, I'll just this down into the corner, that's out of the way, and I'd like to talk about the Polish IT job market. But first of all, I'm going to say a few words about who I am. Who is this guy? There we go. So, who am I? Well, I'm originally from a small town on the east side of London called Romford. This is why I have the accent that I do. Okay? I originally studied chemistry at Oxford and then switched to doing it after my first degree to doing artificial intelligence. So I did my master's and PhD at Edinburgh in artificial intelligence. And then I got a job at City University. It's now called City and St George's. It merged with a medical school. Okay, it's part of the University of London. And for a while, I was head of computing, so head of department. And then also while I was doing head of department, I also got an MBA. But over 12 years ago, I quit my job and went to travel around the world. And then I did some consultancy and what I called interim management contracts. And I also have been for some years a University of London examiner. So I examined for University of London International Programme. It's possible to do some University of London degrees by examination only. You go in to the British Council office, you sit the exams. If you sit all the exams, you get the degree. Okay, this has been going for about 150 years. I'm also a qualified English teacher because I did that while I worked between consultancy jobs. And I've also worked in private international education. I've worked for Study Group. Study Group is a large provider of basically courses that transition overseas international students, and it provides a one-year course that it transitions them into the education system of, say, the UK or Australia. Okay, and I worked in one of their centres there. So for those of you who are, let's put it this way, nothing will probably surprise me about anything that an international student does. I have seen it all. I really have seen it all. I've had students nearly die in my common room. So all of this is there. So I'm in that, and given the fact I've also worked in the university in London, is that I have worked with students from all nationalities everywhere. Okay, and I joined the Warsaw School of Computer Science. I've been in Poland since 2018, but I joined the Warsaw School of Computer Science a few years ago because I missed teaching. So I sent my CV into the school, and I got a very quick response from the president saying, "Can we have a chat?" And there was an AI project which they had which they needed some help with, and I got asked a few months ago by the president if I could help them look after the English language students because of my background in dealing with international students. So that's, oops. I've gone. Now, what do I actually do here? Well, I mentioned this quick response I got from the president. The EU project was called ARISA, the Artificial Intelligence Skills Alliance. And it's a big EU project, multinational, and its aim is to develop and transform the AI skills landscape in Europe. And actually, if you look on this slide here, there's a URL, academy.aiskills.eu. Okay, that is actually an online academy which you can join for free and learn stuff about AI. We contributed to the AI and cybersecurity part. Okay, so what we're also doing is we're running, and this is relevant to the discussion we have about the masters, is I'm also running a pilot to develop the next generation of machine learning engineers. So next weekend, we've got the last teaching weekend of the pilot, and there's about 17 students who are mostly working in the IT industry, and we're upskilling them in our AI. I also sit on a standards workshop for AI skills, and we're working on a new standards for skills. And at the school, I also teach ML foundations on this pilot, And I also, on the master's course, if you join us, you will see me in the first term because I teach cybersecurity. Okay, if I'm looking after, I've been teaching cybersecurity on the course for the last 2 years, and if I am looking after the students as the director of studies, I want to see you in the first term myself. So I teach you, and I'll teach cybersecurity.
Is that part of every master?
Everyone does it. Everyone does it. It's cybersecurity is too important now. You can't just do it as an add-on. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the details of the masters. And I oversee the international programs now. We got asked a few months ago to do that. I also freelance doing various things. So let me just put this out of the way. The other thing is before I start talking about skills and job markets, I've been working in skills a long time. This is 2007, this report. And in the UK, I did a lot of work when I was working on this, when I was working in UK university. I contributed reports about the AI skills, the skills landscape in IT in the UK. And also the part that I ran when I was head of computing was actually one of the best in the UK for giving students jobs. Okay? Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is a lot of what I'm going to say and a lot of what I'm going to say what is happening, explain what's happening now in Poland and what's about to happen in Poland. Why do I know this? Because it happened in the UK 20 years ago. I see the future because I saw the past somewhere else. It is not rocket science. I was there in a different country. It's gone through the transformation, different reasons, but the underlying drivers are the same. And do the same thing, you get the same situation, you're going to get the similar outcomes. Okay? And I'm also going to give you some actionable advice on how to navigate this, okay? Which I hope will be useful to you, whether or not you decide to do a master's degree with us or not. What I want to do for the first half of this, at least, is to give you information which is going to be useful to you, whatever you decide to do. So, now, part of the problem in trying to understand what's going on is that actually understanding what's going on with job markets is hard. The problem you guys face is that you let me just check. One moment. Just want to check. Yeah, and okay. Let's get this back onto a slight technical issue. I'm hoping the guys online, if you can't see anything, just shout on the mic and I will hear you, okay? Is that the understanding stuff is actually quite hard in terms of job market. Why? Because if you're on the job market, because a lot of what you hear is people's particular perceptions at the time, okay? And you hear maybe bits of story of people's own journeys through the job market, okay? And that's incomplete. And even when you start looking at data, it's hard to know these things. So, for example, there's always a question, has IT actually improved the economy? If you look at it at a microeconomic level, this guy puts a new IT system into their company, orders go up 20%. So, yeah, it works. But when you start looking at nationwide figures, it all seems to average out and you don't see it anymore. So it's really hard to actually find out what works. And the other problem is when you do pilots, for example, and you try to do interventions, what you do is, okay, we got an idea, we're going to run a pilot. I'm going to tell you something, most pilots work, especially educational pilots. Because if you imagine you're in a school and you want to, and say the Polish government says, we want to try out this new and funky idea on how to teach kids. Any volunteers? Is the volunteer going to be the alcoholic 50-year-old teacher in their 50s? Or is it going to be the young teacher who's incredibly enthusiastic? It's going to be the enthusiastic teachers. And one thing about enthusiastic teachers is they're always going to make the teaching work. So it's always very hard. So here, people tend to make assumptions. So in the case of AI, which we'll talk about a few points, is that basically you develop software and you've got a whole pile of complexity. You not only have to program, you need to understand the platforms, how they work together, how they interact. It's all horrible and messy. And then you think, well, okay, well, when we've got AI, we can abstract away all this complexity and it'll be easy. But actually what you end up going to happening is you're going to get a new pile of complexity due to the AI, and then which sits on top of the old pile of complexity. So this is hard. So I'm going to try to make some attempts to interpret the present and the future, but this is where I think things are going to get a bit hard. Okay. Now stop me at any point if you don't understand what I'm saying or you want clarification. Excuse me for a moment. So, what does the IT job market look like? Well, when I asked ChatGPT, this is what the first line came up with. So I thought I'd ask ChatGPT. The IT sector is growing with strong demand for specialist data and AI, cybersecurity, and cloud computing. Extracting it straight from a website, okay? Because the latest versions of ChatGPT, even on public versions, have what is called retrieval augmented generation. In other words, they look on the web. Now, I agree with the areas. I don't necessarily so much agree with the growing. And it is an attractive destination because the Polish IT industry has grown because you had a magical combination which lasts up until the last 3 or 4 years of having low wages and low costs and really, really well-educated computer science graduates, which is great. Also, you had another advantage, which is most of your customers are like British, Germans, and Americans, say, maybe if you can, okay? And you're not culturally so distant from them. It is, I know there are cultural differences between Poles and Brits and Poles and Americans and Poles and Germans, but they are not massive ones. It's not like, for example, for those of you dialing in from abroad, Europeans trying to deal with people from Asia, for example, can be hard work. There are plenty of misunderstandings going on there. And okay, the IT salary growth has slowed, but it is picking up. And when you hear the reports, they keep saying, well, we're short of about 50,000 IT specialists. Okay, 50,000 IT specialists, 20% in cybersecurity. And you know why everyone does cybersecurity on the masters, you're all doing it, okay? Hi there, little baby. But this hides. But the problem is that some of you are going to tell me, but is the job market in Poland slow? Yes, it is. What's happened, and we'll come to this later, but in short, what's happened is that 3 years ago, well, 3 or 4 years ago, there was a massive hiring frenzy. And anyone with a pulse and Python and programming skills pretty much got thrown into a job in IT. It was crazy. The Polish press was using the term El Dorado. It's like city of gold. And people were getting paid really good money, even as junior programmers, etc. But because it's over-recruited and there's other pressures, what's happened now is that, especially for junior and entry roles, it's the number of vacancies is low. They're not necessarily getting rid of large numbers of people. Because remember, there will be some people losing their jobs. There are always people losing their jobs, but mostly it's just slowed down, especially at junior roles. Okay, and this is a temporary effect that's going to last a few years because the system way over recruited. Okay, but it's going to settle out, and in 2 years' time, I think it's going to be actually fairly back to normal. Oops, that's it. So what are the salaries like? Well, here's a report here. Now, what I'm going to do is, you've all registered, yes? You're registered for the event today? because what I'll do is I'll get the office to send you these slides as a PDF. Okay. So if you registered to those online as well, because you're registered, I will get them on Monday or Tuesday to email us these slides of PDF. So you'll get all the web links. Okay, so you can look at this stuff yourself. Let's look at 2 jobs. To be perfectly honest, there's some difference, but actually most of the differences what determines your salary is more to do with your expertise and your level and where you are. You get paid more in Warsaw, for example, okay? But if you're going in at entry level, and of course here is B2B, działalność gospodarcza, for those of you who speak Polish, and a contract of employment, okay? So if we're looking at employment rates, junior role, trainee or junior AI engineer, 10-ish K a month, mid 20K a month, and seniors going to 25, 30, maybe a bit more. It depends also which company you're working for. Banks will pay more, for example. Okay? Then you've got the security engineer. It's a little lower because AI is a hot topic. Generally, security is actually quite a good area to get into, still at the lower level, because security still requires a lot of people working as junior analysts, because the amount of data and stuff they've got to handle, the amount of incidents. So there's still quite a few entry-level roles in security. Also, everyone's terrified of the Russians. Let's say, I was at a meeting in the EU on skills, and basically they kept talking about AI and cybersecurity and about how terrified they are of the Russians. So even the European Union has worked this one out. Which for them is quite fast. So, just to give you an overview of what's going on right now, is that the Polish IT industry has actually benefited from a combination of 2 very fortunate things. This has happened in the last 10, 20 years. It's benefited from the fact that the schools are actually very good at teaching maths here. And the technical education is actually really quite good in Polish universities. And wages were low. I'm going to say were low. We're going to talk about that later. So what's happened, and we'll look at this in a number of different ones, is that this has actually led to a bottom-heavy workforce. So what you had until a few years ago, and I'll show you a picture of it later, is you had, for those of you on it, you had a few people at the top, CIOs, technical architects, and a lot of people at the bottom, a lot of juniors. And what was happening was, because you had advantages, cultural, language, educational, you're not as cheap as India. You never were as cheap as India, okay? But you can deal with other Europeans and Americans quite easily. Some people almost call nearshoring. So a lot of stuff where it was more high contact work, and then they used to give the work to the juniors. So they used to have lots of people in junior positions grinding out the stuff, because it was definitely cheaper to get Poles to do it than to try to get it done in London or these states. So these companies used to take work, development work from there. You know, the senior people would talk to the customers, the juniors would work. Now, and what's happened is that what you see now, we're going to talk about why this happened, is the bottom is shrinking. The number of juniors is going from this pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid is shrinking. Okay? How do I know this has happened? One, I can see it, and I ask around, and I talk to people who run IT companies. The second reason I know this is happening is because it is exactly what happened in the United Kingdom about 20 years ago. We did have outsourcing then, but we discovered outsourcing. So what happened was, the UK is a bit strange. The UK has a very successful IT industry because we have one of the world's largest financial centres. And if you remember that a bank is basically an IT services company with a banking license, because all a bank basically is, it's an IT services company, right? That can do banking, is allowed to do banking. Is that this? Then what happened was is that we did this, And then the banks realised, well, wait a minute, we're recruiting lots of people. So they decided doing a bit of outsourcing. They first started to outsource stuff to Ireland because the Republic of Ireland's wages were like, the wages in Dublin at the time were like the wages in a poorer part of the United Kingdom. And it was nice because the project manager could go for a Guinness in Dublin. If you've not visited the Republic of Ireland, it's lovely. And then later on they discovered India and cheapness. So lots of stuff got moved. So and we also had a surge like you had in Poland. You had an outsurge because you were taking lots of outsourcing work. We had the surge because of the dot-com boom. Remember that? If so, those is it. And also, there was something called the Millennium Bug. And any of you remember the Millennium Bug? No? But there was a big panic because when we wrote IT systems, we only thought they were going to last 20 years in the 1970s. They actually lasted a lot longer than that. So we only set up the systems, for a lot of systems, to use 2 digits for the year, 87. Not 1987, 87. And then people said, well, wait a minute. That means when we hit year 2000, random things can happen, systems might crash, and civilization may end. People were seriously saying this. So lots of people got IT contracting work, very well paid, in the 2 or 3 years leading up to the year 2000, to go through large amounts of legacy code to change the dates from being 2-digit dates to 4-digit dates. And these guys were making loads of, they were all so clever. And they used to set themselves up as companies, B2B, because they pay less tax. And then they realised that after the work had finished, there was this work wasn't there. They thought, you got the dot-com boom, so they could work for still lots of demand for IT workers. It was still going well. And then the dot-com crash happened. If you think you have a downturn in Poland, you do not have a downturn in Poland. You have a slowdown. I have seen a crash. I have seen the carnage. Nobody could get work just after the dot-com crash. Even the really, really good people found it incredibly difficult to get work. So this is why I've seen this type of thing happen already. Okay? What you've got happening in Poland is kind of happening slowly, like a balloon. A little balloon with a small hole in it, and it shrinks slowly. This is what's happening, okay? But this is what's actually happening. So we're going to talk about the drivers behind this. And then I'm going to give you some actionable advice. So I've now got your mind into the right area about what's actually going on. Okay, because once you understand the underlying, but I want to talk a bit more about the underlying forces behind this. Because if you understand this, you'll be able to interpret what you read in the press and the media much better. Okay, and this will then allow you to take control of your careers. Okay, so context. As I said, in the UK, well, we had the transition. Which you're currently going through. It was short, it was sharp, it was quick, and it was driven by the dot-com boom hype cycle. We'll come to that in a minute. And the fact that there was a lot of people employed basically chasing a legacy problem, okay? Fixing bugs in code, okay? With dates. Now, there's something called a hype cycle. And if you look at the graph on the right-hand side, you'll see an example of the hype cycle. This is a July 23, but it hasn't changed much. I've looked at the latest one. So what happens is when a new technology comes around, there's like an innovation trigger. In other words, it starts and goes, oh, this is interesting. And people start looking at it and the interest builds up. And then the people then go say, it's going to solve the world. Everything's going to change. Invest in it now. This is the new paradigm. This is the new technology. This is the future. And you've seen all the hype merchants, haven't you? Yeah. AI is going to like transcend us. We're all going to become beings of light, and the world's going to end depending on who you ask. Okay, that's where things are then. And then what's happening now? We're in the process of moving down here at the moment. Generative AI was there. It's about here now, which is around roughly where edge AI. We're going into the trough of disillusionment when people realise it doesn't work as well as you thought it would. That's a surprise. Given it, you said it was going to solve all the world's problems. No. And then very quickly, we're going to come out of that and we're going to go into the slope of enlightenment or the plateau, where it basically recovers. And at the end of it, everyone has a sensible idea and it's just another technology. This hype cycle happened for e-commerce in the early 2000s. This hype cycle is happening now with artificial intelligence. It's not that artificial intelligence isn't useful, you'll get jobs doing it. It will be transformational. It's the same. If you are telling me that e-commerce is not important, was not important, please explain Allegro. Please explain Amazon. Okay? But it's never as kind of as big as people say it is at the start. Okay. So AI does have hype cycles, as not technical, but AI is particularly prone to them. Okay, so this is what's happening right now. We're moving through Poland's had the double whammy of having an outsourcing boom because people wanted to use you because your programmers were good and they were relatively cheap. And it's also been pumped up by this hype cycle, global hype cycle at the same time. Okay? This has happened. These trends are reversing a bit and stabilizing. That's why the job market at the moment is slow. But it will come back. It will come back in a year or two to being sensible again. It always does. Okay? Oops. Keep hitting the wrong key. Right. So, let's talk about AI for a moment, because it is a driver, and the AI is relevant to the job market, partly because of this hype cycle dynamic, but there's another dynamic, is that although AI isn't going to solve the world, it is going to change how people work. We're still feeling out how to do this the best way. Okay, we are still feeling it out. We don't exactly know, but if we start looking at, for example, a US report, it's the one on the right, then you can see that there are a number of jobs which are exposed to being automated. And it's usually knowledge worker, low-level knowledge worker jobs. I mean, you probably, do you know anyone who works in Mordor? Those of you abroad, you won't know what Mordor is, but once you move here, you will know. Okay? Mordor Dominesi. Yeah? Yeah, people working in Mordor, what they normally do is sit in offices and basically more or less cut and paste information into a different form, right? Generative AI can knock out a draft of that quite quickly, yes? So their jobs are getting slowly automated. So office administrative support, you don't need to write a letter. ChatGPT, write me a letter. Check it. If you're smart, send it. Legal. I know people who work as legal proofreaders in law firms and are complaining that the lawyers are using ChatGPT to write legal documents in English and then sending it out without going through the proofreader, and it has mistakes. There's actually been a British court case in the last few weeks where the judge has basically said, please stop sending me court documents generated with ChatGPT because it makes up the legal cases, the legal references. So he said, in this case, doesn't exist. But we will work this all out. So you can see here, so stuff where you're doing stuff with your hands, personal care, production, cleaning, no effect. Some effect for computer and mathematical works, and the same here. There's another number on the left of the BBC's one. Health could be could also generate jobs on the other side. So, for example, could be more in education, for example, because of increased training needs. So there is on the left there are opportunities and predictions that the use of this AI will generate jobs. And in other sectors, it's going to expose these jobs to automation. Okay. This also includes, of course, the work that we do. Now, before we do that, actually, what is the evidence, the actual real evidence that AI will actually change the world of work? Or does it actually work? Does it actually produce anything? Now, it's very hard when you measure macroeconomics in like GDP and the government says, oh, you know, the economy has grown 5% this year, etc. It's hard to tease out the effects of AI. Almost impossible, okay? But microeconomically, when you look at a company and it says, well, we used to have 3 administrators writing letters. We now have 1 administrator who uses ChatGPT. That's measurable, yes? That's obvious and measurable. So what happens for knowledge work? Yeah, what these people in Mordor looking at information and basically taking one information, bit of copy paste and repackaging information in a different way. Well, they did some work with BCG, okay? This was also, and a couple of well-known US business schools. And generally, people using AI, actually, there was an improvement in speed and quality in what they produced. This was for a consulting firm. It was BCG, if you've heard of it. It's a well-known one. And generally, the improvement was more marked for junior consultants than for experienced consultants, which kind of makes sense, right? If you're experienced, you can do these tasks quickly because you've been doing them for years. You can do them accurately because you've been doing them for years, you know. Generative AI isn't going to speed you up that much because you're good at your job. Juniors, however, actually had a for score on the task. Actually, their task performance increased by 43%. So there's an idea here that actually when you're using these tools, is that for knowledge work, if used properly, they do seem to actually increase productivity. Now, I want you to keep an eye on that, because there's a trend. And the trend is to do with what we call a similar thing, co-pilots for programming. You've probably heard of them, yes? Or if some of you, get chat. And the basic idea is get ChatGPT to write my code for. Okay. And this is having an effect as well. Not only is there the economic push around the outsourcing industry in Poland, but also generative AI is helping devs to be much more productive, or significantly more productive. Okay. Now, a lot of the evidence for this is anecdotal. It's what people say. I tried this in my company and it seems to work. It's always tricky because the problem is that you do something, it seems to work, and then in programming, in software development, you realize why it doesn't work 6 months later into the project. Oh, we got the requirements done in a day. Oh, brilliant. 6 months later, the requirements were crap and we have to start all over again. So this is what you have to be careful of, okay? The trends on the co-pilot, etc. So we're still washing this out, but on small scale, these are small scale studies, but they are peer reviewed, okay? And the academic literature, there's only one systematic study I found, indicates a benefit. But just want you to just get some things to do. Automation in software development and anything to do with software operations is nothing new. Programmers have always been expensive. Skilled systems administrators have always been expensive. Skilled business analysts have always been expensive. They are paid well. That's why you're in the room with me today, right? Because you want some of that action. So we have no or low code systems, which will build stuff up quickly for you. just by saying what you want. There used to be what was called computer-aided software engineering. That's so very 1990s. Development environments. People have been writing code and systems to make the programmer's job easier. And this has been going on ever since programming has started. This is just the latest generation of this. Okay. But co-pilots, but generally what I've, let me just go on to the next slide. Because, oops. Here are some discussions here about co-pilots. But generally, when I've seen people use commercial co-pilots, this is what they've said. Co-pilots are good for knocking out pieces of short, routine code, like setting up a database connection, giving me some code for Windows, stubs, etc., like that. You give it anything more than that, you really start to get into trouble. Now, do your experienced programmers generally spend their time writing bits of routine code? No, you give that to the juniors to do so they can learn. So the pressure here is on the juniors. Simultaneously, co-pilots make junior developers more effective because the co-pilot can help them so they can do the task quicker, but also which means you need less of them, but also means that the senior dev can actually get the generative AI to do stuff for him or her, which they would have given juniors to do, which shrinks the demands on juniors. And Poland has over-recruited junior programmers over the last 4 years because of the outsourcing boom. So there's a lot of pressure, right? So this is a contributory factor. It isn't the only one. You would be seeing something like what you're seeing right now, even if AI didn't exist. But it's emphasized the effect. Okay. So one piece of advice is when you actually learn development, it's also learn how to use AI effectively and ethically. And there's lots of problems with it. But in terms of economics, that's what's actually going on. Now, this is just me being a little bit sarcastic. I remember when I joined the EU project, I joined in the middle of this EU project AI skills. I was reading some of the early reports where they asked managers what we need for AI. They said, we need prompt engineering. And all that, myself and all the technical people on the bus just put our heads down to, oh my God, it's basically being able to communicate clearly in writing. And this is actually the real problem because everyone seems to think, the world seems to think that the hardest part, the hardest part and where things go wrong is actually in the programming. Because it's what they personally find hardest. Actually, the hardest part and the where you make the most avoidable expensive errors is actually before you write the code. It's understanding the client's problem. It's getting the requirements clear and unambiguous in a way that programmers can use it, yes? Now, you could use generative AI to produce a convincing looking requirements document, and it would look convincing, unless you looked at the detail. And in there, you'll realize it's garbage. But, but at the end of the day, it's just, we still have the same problem. Is that whether you use programmers or whether you use generative AI, somebody has got to take this woolly problem for a bunch of people who are not technical and turn it into a technical problem, which is clear and pretty unambiguous to programmers to turn into code. Generative AI doesn't really help that much in that. It appears it can, but it will just hallucinate information or other things here. You still need humans, you still need insight, you still need areas. And prompt engineering is basically a somewhat constrained way of basically saying, this is what I want very clear. Okay? There are a few tricks, but generally, if you can communicate clearly in writing, you're 80% of the way there. The other is about vibe coding, which scares the hell out of me. I'm just going to say what I want and then get it to run it and then And then if it doesn't do what I want, I'll write some more stuff and it will just rewrite the code until, oh, it's a great way of knocking out a prototype. Prototypes are great. But then we get into a world now where we've got writers that can't write, politicians that don't know their own laws, if you live in Poland, engineers that can't code, and lawyers that don't know law, and musicians who don't understand how music works. So we're heading in this direction anyway. Maybe some kind of vibe civilization where it's all going. So actually, the main reason why you all are going to get high-paid jobs in industry is because, in a way, you're engineers. You problem solve. You think clearly. Okay, that's what they're paying you for. What they won't pay you for is to do anything that ChatGPT could do for you. So I'm going to warn you now that if you sign on to the course and you see me for cybersecurity, one of the most common bits of feedback saying, or I'll get to say, please don't give me stuff that ChatGPT could write. If I ask you to say, here's a case study, where are the security holes? Don't give me generic, I think you should install the virus checker. Oh, wow, what insight. That's worth a thousand zloty a day. No, think, insight. You're competing, because if you're just knocking out stuff that ChatGPT can write, they will use ChatGPT. And that's not going to get you a high, well-paid job. So that's your first insult. Sorry about this. Now, this is just summarizing what I said about outsourcing. Okay? And there's some links here which talks about some of these topics in more detail. As I said, Poland's been really well served by outsourcing. You've got a lot of advantages. In terms of time zone, you are easy for the Brits and the Germans and Western European in general, and you're doable for the US. Yeah, the US works. Not easy. Sometimes you're meeting them in the evening, while it's the morning for you, or vice versa, but you can make it work. Most Poles speak English, and young Poles speak English quite well if they're reasonably educated. Okay, Poles don't necessarily enjoy writing in English as much, but they definitely will speak it. So it means they can participate in meetings, and culturally, we're all not so different. We've got some cultural differences. Sometimes I bash my head against the wall, especially when I meet bureaucracy. This makes no sense. But there we go. But what is happening is that some Polish firms are shifting what are called non-core services. And this is what happened in the UK. Because outsourcing can actually happen in multiple directions. It's not a case you are the recipient of outsourcing or you're the person who does the outsourcing. It's a mixture. So, for example, when the UK discovered India, there was a big moral panic about, oh my God, all these jobs are disappearing. We'll have no IT industry left. Until somebody pointed out that actually, around 2010, the UK exported more IT services to India than the Indian outsourcers exported to us in the UK. Because we exported all the high value work, the consultancy, the systems design, etc. The Indians, we outsourced to India all of the routine coding or run the servers work. Okay. Well, you've got this mixed model in Poland at the moment. There's lots of IT companies that are actually so Poland's taking in outsourcing work from the West. And for some of the jobs which you would have used cheap Polish juniors for, they are now basically sending out to India. So actually, right now, Polish project managers are tearing their hair out because they have no experience in dealing with Asian programming teams. That work differently because they're a different culture. Okay? The UK, we've learned how to do this. And the UK had the advantage when we export to India, is that we have a large Anglo-Indian and Anglo-Pakistani community. So we actually had people in country that understood how things worked. This is a bit of a challenge at the moment. So this is what's going on with outsourcing. As I said, it's mostly affecting just the shrinkage on junior roles, and we'll come back to that later. And of course, a lot of this is driven by wages. This is the minimum wage in Poland. It's gone up from 800 zloty in 2003, and January 2005 was about 4,500. Okay. Now I know you've had quite a bit of inflation as well. I realise this every time I go shopping. Poland is no longer ridiculously cheap. Not for IT services. You're good value. Yeah. People using your programming services are getting a good price for the quality of what they're getting. Okay, they're getting good quality at a reasonable price. But cheap is not how I would call it. Not anymore. So you're reducing cost of margins, but it was pressure on margins. It means your companies, and this has happened over the last 5 or 6 years, have shifted towards high value services. I've known companies that started it just doing normal code shops. They're basically code shops. They started as code shops. They took some stuff from Germans, they coded it, they sent it back. That same company now will do business consultancy. It will help you design your product. It will do the high value services. Oh, and we can code it too. They shifted. And then those companies shifted then. They've started to outsource work to India for some of the lower stuff. Okay. And there's certain areas where Poland does quite well. AI, cybersecurity, DevOps actually are really quite areas of actual good technical strength. Okay. And also nearshoring is still competitive. Okay. So here, Poland does remain attractive for nearshoring because of the cultural fit factors, time zones, cultural fit. So we are, okay. Let's resume. It's all on recording. And great, you're all on one side, which makes it much easier for me. So, hi there, everyone's online. Let's get started again. What I want to do is finish by about 10:02, because this gives time for my colleague, Mr. Andrew Tuson, to come in and prepare for his lecture in Polish. I could try to do this in Polish. It would be hilariously bad. My Polish is enough to handling forms at the district office, there. Much to the amusement of the people in the district office. I go to the Żoliborz district office, and the starost comes out of his office and sits behind the person serving me, watching me, thinking, oh, there's somebody foreigner trying to speak Polish. It's very funny. So I get it done, but it's very funny Polish. Okay, so what I want to say now is I just want to quickly recap what we're saying and then give you some actionable advice, and then spend a little time about talking about our offer, okay, for the English language masters. Okay, so as I said, this has happened before, and it is going to happen again. One moment there. There we go. Oh, it's over there. That's why. Okay. So this is summarising what I was saying earlier. So a number of times earlier, the IT skills pyramid traditionally is a skills pyramid. It's a pyramid. It's a combination of higher wages in Poland, plus AI, exposing some of the routine tasks that developers do to automation. Means that this pyramid you see here is going to be shrinking at the bottom. So it's no longer going to be a pyramid. It's going to be some kind of trapezium, or it's going to be a pyramid with the bottom corners chopped off. And this has happened in the UK. This is now why I know it's going to happen, because it's happened already elsewhere. And it's the normal part of the evolution of an IT industry. It's also a dangerous part, and why actually you're going to need expat IT workers. I'm going to explain why. When you cut off the bottom corners of that pyramid, you cut off your supply of juniors, or you shrink your pool of juniors. Give it 3 or 4 years. What do juniors become? Senior programmers. Some will leave because they realise it's not for them. Some will move sideways into management, and some will become project managers, and some will become seniors, etc. If we suddenly don't have it in the UK, really shrink the number of junior programmers we've got, the middle has a problem. Because people keep saying, oh, we need 50,000 IT workers a year in Poland, especially in cybersecurity. That is 50,000 throughout that pyramid, and most of that 50,000 is in the middle. I know that because it happened elsewhere. So if you cut off the supply of juniors, in 3 years' time, there are going to be shortages in the middle layer. So as I went, right, then this is great for you guys because hopefully you'll be seniors by then and you are moving to senior and you're going, oh, jobs are better pay. However, and it's a good opportunity for people studying a master's right now, joining us maybe from Georgia or maybe from, we've got students from Nigeria, we have students from India and Pakistan. Because it's an opportunity for them, because they'll come out the masters, they probably would have worked in IT while they were studying, because you can on a student visa. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then there'll be a nice dynamic job market for you. So that's what I'm saying at the moment. The market is slow because they've had the recruitment binge. And its pressures are on juniors. Once you get into junior, and get through junior into senior, life looks good. And this is actually the situation in the UK. Okay? Because I can tell you, around the year 2000, most IT workers were basically doing junior level tasks in cubicle farms. They were working in cubicles. It was horrible and depressing. And the work was rubbish and boring. The work is now interesting. IT work is a lot more interesting than it was 20 years ago. Okay? And as part of the reason is because all the routine stuff's been automated or outsourced. Doesn't matter who's been. Now, can the UK inform Poland? Well, there are some things here. Because in Poland, there's still a kind of employment narrative that graduates are really good, they're good at maths, they're great at programming, and that is enough. But actually, for engineering, like building bridges and designing motor cars and things like that. Hi there. Hi there. Do you have a question? Hello? Hello? Okay. So for engineers, they are looking. If you want something to build a bridge, you want to employ as graduate engineering graduate for Polytechnic to build a bridge for you, civil engineering, you're looking at their grades, you're looking at they can do maths and structure, physics and stuff. For your general graduates, we did English geology or something, okay? Or history. If they're being employed, they're looking for their soft skills, their ability to communicate, to negotiate with people, to work well in teams, etc. For IT, for computer science is different. Actually, and accountancy, believe it or not, has the same story. Both are equally important. So in Poland at the moment, the employment narrative is technical skills, technical skills, technical skills. But in the UK, it moved from that towards being technical skills and can communicate. Because Poland is moving to higher value work. Higher value work means you need to talk to clients. Higher value work means you need to understand the client's problem. Higher value work does not mean you can sit in a cubicle or in your bedroom cutting code all day, going or grunting at people. That's the change. It happened in the UK, and that transition is happening in Poland right now. More is going to be expected of graduates. Okay? Which actually means that in the UK there's a paradox, and you're going to see this paradox in Poland in the coming years. In the UK, in Poland, they say they're short 50,000 IT workers a year. It's about 100,000 in the UK. Most of them in the middle, not juniors, mid, seniors, and mid. Okay. Computer science graduates in the UK, like computer science graduates in Poland, earn really good money, but a lot of them are unemployed. About 10% are unemployed after 6 months. So there's massive demand for skilled computer scientists, but 10% computer science graduates are unemployed. What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Because that 10% aren't highly skilled and don't have the other additional abilities in order to actually get on. This is going to be driving. So it's not just going to be a case of having really sharp technical skills. It's also going to be your ability to deal with clients, especially in multinational teams, which is going to be much more a feature of the Polish IT industry. Multinational teams is not just going to be in corpo. I know that a number of people run small and medium-sized IT firms, and it's getting much more multinational. And this is important, okay? So, in effect, you can't just be somebody who's got a piece of paper with the word computer on it. You've got to have good technical skills and business awareness and the ability to communicate with clients, etc., etc. Okay, and that's what's happened in the UK. And the part of the problem is, and this is the UK experience, is it's a bit hard to you can have a look at the idea is that if you look at the rankings here, the rankings between what graduate employers want mostly in candidates and what candidates actually, the graduate employers actually want and what the candidates think they want are two different things. So there's a big, in the UK, there's a big mismatch between what people studying for degrees think the employers want and then what the employers actually do want. Okay? So there is a big difference there. And you can, as I said, we'll send you all of this. Now, I'm now going to scare you a bit. I presented this slide to the school, and we have an annual conference. And now in Poland, you can earn very good money in relation to living costs. You can live quite well. Okay. Now the problem is when people look at the salaries in the UK, the UK is separate, they look at London. London is a separate country. I'm from London. We are culturally and economically very different from the rest of the UK. Imagine a world-class city, a hub of economic engine, and then the rest of the country, which is like near economically, middling, some of it's quite poor. That's the UK. So you've got some hotspots, you've got London, you've got some hotspots around Manchester, Edinburgh, Birmingham does okay around the Midlands because of engineering, and then it does not as good. Let's look at Newcastle, where most of the largest employer, by far the largest employer, employers 1, 2, and 3 are government in Newcastle. Health service, administration, government administration, etc. Most of Newcastle works for the government, directly or indirectly. Okay, wages are much lower. So junior dev in Newcastle earns between £23,000 and £29,000 per annum, or in Polish terms, 11k per month gross. Isn't that roughly the same as a junior programmer dev in Warsaw? Yes, it is. And also, you've got the problem in Poland is that you have recruited junior devs. Some of these junior devs weren't that good because there was a rush to recruit. Whereas the guys in Newcastle, we've had to compete with Indians for the job for like 20 years. They're lean, they're hungry, they're sharp. So let's have a look at the nightmare scenario, which is, and I always wanted to say this in a room full of Polish people. Wait a second. Here we go. It's not a case about whether or not robots are going to steal your job. AI is going to steal your job. It's whether or not actually people from Newcastle will steal your job. The Brits are coming, and they're going to steal your IT jobs. That's the competition. If you go outside of London, the wage differential is not so large. So all that nice nearshoring work that you'll be taking from the City of London and the ecosystem around London and the southeast of England, where most of the M4 corridor, they will think, wait a minute, we can employ Geordies. We can employ people from Newcastle. That's much easier. I only have to take this, right? So it's just a bit of fun, but I don't have nightmares, but there's going to be increasing pressure on Polish companies. I think Polish companies are going to adapt. They're going to adapt by going higher value, your skills are going to get better, etc. But if you hear anyone say, oh, it was wonderful 5 years ago, I pretended to learn Python and walked into a job, those days are gone. You're going to have to start working for it, I'm afraid. But that's been the reality in the UK for the last 25 years anyway. And I know how, and as I said to the president, I know how to do this. So there's actually two things going on in the job market right now. Two IT transitions. There's an AI-driven one and there's an economic-driven one. And whether or not they possibly can use this to interact positively or negatively is entirely up to Poland. It could be positive. We could use the AI as a springboard into moving to higher level services, better paid jobs, highly skilled jobs. Okay? Or we could just sit there, Jako Sabenje, and hopefully hope something will happen, carry on doing what worked for the last 15 years and get out-competed as the UK realises that actually we can nearshore to Newcastle rather than Poland, because actually Geordies have become the value again. A Geordie, by the way, is somebody who lives in Newcastle. For those who. So the question I would ask is, how can you adapt yourself to get through this transition, and how can we best deliver and articulate value to IT employers? Now, this is definitely something that British graduates are better at doing than Polish ones, because you're not really able to do it. Okay? So, the bad news is the easy days are over. The good news is, if the work gets more expensive, it's more interesting. So you won't be doing rubbish work, writing blue code for a database for 2 or 3 years before they give you something fun to do. But you're going to have to be at a skill level that allows you to go to actually contribute to the more difficult and expensive work on graduation. That's why there's relatively high unemployment amongst computer science graduates in the UK, is because without short all the work that somebody rubbish should do, frankly, you have to be competent, minimum competent, in order to be able to be employable, because there's no work for less than that. And the other observation is the Polish IT industry is going to be much more international. Now, your challenge is, how do we do this? Now, because I've worked in skills in the UK for a long time, as I said, I was in university based in central London. It's the toughest place to run a computer science department in Europe. There are 49 higher education institutions in London. Most of them have computer science departments, and most of them will steal my lunch if I let them. They will put me out of business. I know I put some of them out of business first. Okay? I've seen the dot-com crash in the outsourcing waves. Okay? So as I said, it was possible to get a starter job. You could still live well by studying. It's still possible, to do your first degree in computer science in Poland and get a part-time job as a developer. It's hard, etc. So as I said, to keep that job, you're going to need some real skills. The other question was that people who talk their way into a job in the UK when the going was good, we call them chances. Okay, oh, let's go in. I talked a good talk in an interview. I made them believe that I could program Python, even though I looked at a company on the train. Walked in. So what you have to do is, as students, is you need to learn as much as you can, give as much value as you can, and get to senior dev roles as soon as you can. And you have to be able to articulate this. They won't spot it. You've got to basically make it clear to them that you can do this stuff. So it's all about perception and behaviour. So how do you do this? Well, let's have a look. And I'm going to look at the point of view of if you're not Polish. The first challenge is that there are highly cultural differences. For example, in Poland, it is usual to have a photo on your curriculum vitae. In the UK, this would be considered weird and creepy. I don't care what you look like. Why is she doing this? Oh, yeah, very handsome. No. Yeah, it's weird. Don't do that in the UK. Come to the UK, take a photo off. It's weird. But in Poland, it's expected. And also, in Poland, summer is completely dead for hiring. Poles take the holidays very seriously. In about 3 weeks, good luck applying for a job before September. Nothing's going to happen. Even if the application forms are open, the form will just sit there until the decision makers come back from holiday. I mean, it's not as bad as France, but it's noticeable. In London, we keep going. Lower intensity, but we're still like chugging along in August. Poland, unless you work in somewhere, it's like, you basically outside of tourism and transport and shops, the job market, everything just go almost half the same. Which, by the way, I think is a good thing. I actually think it's a good thing, but you have to be aware of it as a foreigner. That if you apply for a job over the summer, do not expect a fast reply. There's also a preference for EU hires because it's easier. They don't have to apply for work permits and stuff. So if you've got an EU passport, it's easy. You can just enter the job markets if you're Polish. Okay. The other question, thing is all this. You have to put some rubbish at the bottom of your CV about Rhoda. Sorry, the GDPR. I therefore give permission for my details to be used for applying for a job. Here's a web link. You need to put it at the bottom. If you don't put that at the bottom, a lot of companies will just reject you. And most foreigners don't know they need to do it. I did a survey, the intake last year. I asked them in cybersecurity, send me your CVs. I'll take a quick look at them. None of them had that text on the bottom of their CV. And that's why we begin rejecting. Got to put that text on the bottom of your CV. I mean, we don't do it in the UK. We have GDPR in the UK, rolled on to the polls. We have GDPR in the UK. We don't have this because we tend to take the view that if somebody sends us a CV in, they want us to read it and perhaps offer them a job. But apparently, no, in Poland, a lot of companies will just want me to have some quasi-legal text at the bottom. The bureaucracy is complex and can be unfriendly. I bought a house in Poland. I put on 8 kilos in stress eating. But it was better, it's better than it was. And also, Poles generally don't understand that some processes and apps are not the same. If I got a zloty, anyone says, well, you can go onto Obywatele and sort it out there quite easily. What does Obywatele mean? Poles? Citizen. Well, why not? I'm not a citizen. I can't use it. So, locking a peso. If I want to lock my peso, I have to go to the district office and fill in a form. You unlock your peso. So processes are different, etc. But I will give you a tip for those of you outside of Poland. If you don't speak Polish, which you probably won't, is write a letter. If you go to a post office, write a letter in Polish, use DeepL, just saying what you want done, and then try to speak some. Do not walk in unprepared and try speaking English. That will not work. I have seen it. People behind the counter get very annoyed when foreigners do that. write a letter, use the email, write a letter in Polish, hand it over, and say something like "Zapraszam mówię trochę po polsku" or something like that, and then they're friendlier. Okay. So that's the challenges. Language. Learn some Polish now, even if it's the basics. If you're Polish, minimum B2 English will be a massive advantage. Okay, preferably C1. So if you're working for multinationals or startups, usually it's work in English. So you're going to need a minimum B2, better C1 English. Okay, but if I have a lot of Polish clients, they may ask for B1 Polish too. So one of my Brazilian friends works at ING Bank. It is a multinational, but because most of what they do is servicing their Polish needs, although they tend to discuss things a lot in English, and they almost all do speak good English. I taught English to their legal department, for example. The only reason he's got a job with them is because he speaks B1 Polish as well. B1 is the minimum for citizenship. It's a bit broken, but you can pretty much... B1 is, you can kind of do most things, but it's a bit broken. Okay. If you're looking at international clients, so it's a Polish business with some international clients, they occasionally have to speak outside. Then you'll need minimum C1 Polish and B1 English. Polish only, if you're only speaking Polish, it's basically the public sector ecosystem of those who work, of companies that work only with Polish businesses. You probably don't want this work. Do you want to be the person who maintains Zeus PNUing? Which is the worst piece of software ever written by anybody, in my opinion, because I have to use it. You have to click through about 5 different buttons in order to sign a letter. And then you look up on the website, say, how do I do this? And it comes up in Polish. So it's in Polish. Go to this website, click on this button, use your trusted profile. There you go. I can do that bit. Other languages can be useful as well. For example, German. If your company does a lot of work with German, okay? But it really is English and Polish. It's a survey, English and Polish. Main language communication at work. 51% of IT companies use English at work. 48% use Polish at work. English level proficiency. B1 is 10%. A2 is 1%. So basically 80% of people speak, 80+% of people speak B1 or better. Okay. B1 is past the citizenship test. It's not very high. I have this B1 in German. It wasn't that difficult. Okay? So it's really now a bilingual market. If you don't speak Polish, you're basically out of probably up to half of the market becomes difficult for you. Okay. Now the other question is, I know Georgia is different. Yes, Georgia is different. This is aimed at people maybe from India or Nigeria. Okay, if you're from Ukraine, if you're from Georgia, if you're from Belarus, they have different arrangements, and it's generally easier, okay, to get to work. Now, it used to be, until the 1st of July, that you could actually turn up, okay, with a student visa. So you get your visa, arrive with student visa, you arrive in Poland, you show your student visa, and then you could have unrestricted access to the labour market, okay? And then when you're enrolled, you then apply for a temporary residency card, which can take over a year to get, because the immigration officers are overloaded. Okay? By the way, while you've got the visa, but not the temporary residency card, it's very difficult to leave Poland, because you may not get back in again. So you're stuck. So a lot of students arrive and are stuck. Okay, for those people, I'm just going to quickly stress, is that if when you arrive on your student visa, you can work, but the company now has to get a work permit for you. They have to pay. They've simplified the process. It's not such a big deal. And because you're, for those of you who are applying here, maybe abroad from, let's say, Nigeria, India, you're graduates, you have real skills. You're not going to become delivery drivers, right? You're not the deliverer, okay? You've probably got a proper job in a proper company, okay? So they probably will get a work permit, okay? They will apply for one. But in this space between you arriving with your student visa and that student visa being turned into a temporary residency card, the company will have to apply for work permit from you. Once you've got your TRC card, unrestricted access to labour markets if you're Polish. Okay? The reason this had happened is because this was abused. This was abused by companies and possibly by some students. Some students were applying to places, usually are first cycle degree students, bachelor students, and they end up working in slaughterhouses. You're working 36 hours a week in a slaughterhouse and in the middle of nowhere, in a place in Poland that not even our Poles will not be able to find on the map. And then you're studying for a full-time degree. Really? Yeah, so it's partly because of that. So I don't think it's going to be a problem for the students we've got because they're graduates, when they're on masters, and they have a graduate coming into Poland that has marketable skills. Which is not the same as an 18-year-old. Okay? So I'm not particularly concerned about that, but you might need to be aware of it. Okay? But let's be clear. There are advantages to actually having expats on the team. The first thing is in a few years' time, they're going to need expats. They're going to need expats who can work in senior roles, senior plus roles, because Poland has shrunk its junior base. And it's going to keep shrinking, which means where are they going to get their seniors from? They're juniors. There won't be enough seniors. They're going to have to import the seniors. So they're going to need to use expats. And actually, Poland's considered a pretty good place to work according to students. So an advantage here is you've got international experience, you've got English proficiency, etc. So, you've got lots of advantages here, okay? You've got culture and other specialised skills and network access. Another question here is if you're a company that's dealing with international clients or you're outsourcing, having international members of staff on your side is actually an advantage. There's one of our students, he's very active in the school, Miff. He's from India, and I suggested he'd make an absolute killing in Poland working because it's very well socialised as a Western, in terms of being European as well as Indian. He's very charming. They made a great job working for Polish companies in dealing with Indian outsourcing teams. Yeah, because so here is a chance for those of you who are coming in from abroad is to actually go to Poland, study here, socialise well, get good at dealing with Poles and understanding how to deal with Poles and Europeans, because then you can bring that back into and make a good killing in terms of money, in terms of trade. So that's it. Now, another piece of actionable advice I'd like to give you is something called the talent stack. Okay? Have any of you heard of this? Scott Adams, Gilbert, cartoons? No, okay. Everyone's like, well, you have to be so good. You said it's going to be difficult to get from real skills. I want to acquire these skills. I'm never going to be the best programmer in the world. You don't have to be. Okay? You said you're from Georgia, sir, yes? How many developers are there? Do you have any other skills apart from IT?
I don't have IT skills. I come from project management.
Excellent. Okay. So imagine a person with an IT background who's works as a project manager and speaks Georgian. Do you also speak Russian by any chance?
Unfortunately, yes, I am.
Yeah, I know. But to get around Central Asia, Russian is handy. Even if most Poles will not enjoy speaking Italian. Russian, you speak Russian, you speak Georgian. Yeah. How many project managers of technology who speak Georgian some Russian, etc., etc. So, in my case, are there lots of people with the doctorates in AI? Yes. Are there lots of people who speak English and the doctorate in AI? Yes. But then add some more things up, particularly to me now. I speak German as well. And you stack up those particular things. Or you don't have to be in the top 1%. The short answer is if you can get in the top 25% of 3 things that support each other, you become hot property. So you don't need to be the best programmer. You don't need to be the best subject. You just need to be in the top 25% and then add your other advantages and stack them on top of each other. So the question I would take away is think about what is your stack? What are the things that you offer? Could be languages, could be experience in a different industry. Yeah, for example, if you worked in healthcare, for example. Okay, if you worked in healthcare, okay? So that is what I'd like to just give you as advice. It's this whole concept of the talent stack. And as I said, anyone who's registered I'll get the office to send the slides out during the week so you can click on the slides, have a look. So that's the last bit. Now, what I want to do is spend the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes, quickly taking you through what we offer. Okay? But before we do that, I just want to give you an example. This is the AI Masters as an example, but it applies to the others. How would you hit a moving target? The IT industry changes fast. We're in the middle of an AI wave. So AI is the most extreme example of this, okay? AI, but how do you actually keep up with stuff? In the case of AI, there's no good textbooks yet, and most of the useful knowledge is in the head of practitioners. Well, because of the EU project I mentioned earlier, to address this problem, we're running a pilot. And this project actually did large amounts of data mining and to actually look for all the job ads and what they interviewed people, etc., to work out what actually employers wanted. And we actually wrote expert curriculum, which we're finalising it, and we're actually feeding that into international standards as well for AI skills. I sit on that committee. But what we actually did is we're running a pilot. Now, there are no good university texts on what's called MLOps. So it used to be, if you're doing AI, if we could teach you Python, run some AI techniques, build a Jupyter notebook. If you don't know what that is, you will see. Then that would be enough. But that's useless. 90% of Jupyter notebooks written in the industry never become production. Because turning that notebook and that AI experimental notebook where you test the proof of concept, turning a proof of concept of machine learning into production code, which we can maintain and update, is hard. It's called MLOps. ML operations, it's DevOps basically, but for machine learning. It's not codified. So on the pilot, we actually ran an ML ops module. I got somebody who's actually Danish. He works in Warsaw to come in. He's been doing it for over 10 years to teach all this stuff. Yeah, the students' heads were exploding, but that's another discussion. And we codified it. We produced materials as part of the project, which we'll be delivering out there. Okay? So what we end up doing here at North is we end up running a lot of educational pilots, often with the European Union and others, in order to actually pilot new material. We also employ a lot of practitioners as well. Okay, the idea is to give you the freshest stuff. Okay, because we have another EU grant which we finished, another EU project, which also includes your courses. So that was like DevOps, full stack developer, etc. That's going. That stuff is going into the courses as well. Many lecturers have industry experience are our practitioners. Okay, Robert Brunette, who works with me, is an ML engineer, for example. He works in the healthcare sector. In the case of the cloud computing masters, most of the lectures are taught by basically it's a commercial company called Cloud Team, and they teach the cloud computing and they align the syllabus. We'll talk about that with some cloud computing certifications. Okay. So, and we've been working with industry a lot over the last 20 years because we are not a research university, we are a teaching institution that focuses on getting students good jobs in the IT industry. Because if we didn't, since computer science is the only thing we do, we'd be out of business very fast. So what I want to do now is I want to quickly just take you through the web pages and take you through what the courses are about, okay? Now, if we go on here, I'm just going to take that off. Hi, everyone online. I'm just going to, there you go, push it there. Oh, sorry. Raining gear. I need more coffee. The coffee's beginning to wear out. Here we go. You can see the, you can see what I'm talking about here, the courses. Okay. So here is one of the, here is the website, okay? So the AI course is a bit different. We'll talk about the AI course first, the background, and then what happens is everything, the other two will make a lot more sense because there is a core, there's a set of modules that everyone's going to take, no matter what course you're on, and then there are other things, specializations. So if you go to most universities, they will teach you the algorithms, they will teach you lots of theory behind the algorithm, they'll teach you about pack learning and these three dimensions, etc., which is cool and interesting. I did my PhD in artificial intelligence. I did algorithms. I like this stuff. But it doesn't necessarily help you keep your job down as an ML engineer. But what there isn't any, what there was a big unmet demand is people, is that everyone thinks in AI, you're the person who designs the algorithms. Actually, you're not. If you're the person making a new, faster, better machine learning algorithm, you have a doctorate and you've probably been working 5 years in postdoctoral research before you write that patentable method on that new algorithm, etc. Okay? It requires levels of weaponized autism. I know because I used to do it. That was what I used to do when I was working as an academic. It wasn't machine learning, it was a closely related area, but I designed algorithms. Okay? And this was true. Now, because the AI wave and also data science are coming up in as well, what's happened is where the demand isn't for people designing algorithms, they're in libraries. You can find them. You can use sklearn, for example. For example, you get these libraries in Python and you've got access to all these special algorithms and they've been optimized. You're not going to do any better. Okay? You need to be working on these algorithms for 10 years and come up with something better than this. Okay? Your job is to turn those algorithms, that code, and those libraries into a useful application that solves the client's problem. So this is what we're focusing on. We're focused on ML engineers who take these technologies and actually make them work. Okay, so we became basically it's around using AI infrastructure to build real solutions. It's not about developing the algorithms themselves. Okay. So if we just look at the course in detail, I'll just explain how we do it, okay? So there's two parts. This part here, the following course subjects, this is what everyone does. You're all going to do it whether you want to or not. Okay. You're going to be doing some stuff with modeling, UML and other things, how to model information systems, because you need to be able to do that, because you've got to write down. It's a basic software engineering, and you've got to be able to model correctly. We're going to talk about distributed processing and clouds. You'll get a basic code there. You're going to do something with mobile systems, for example, data mining, which will be, it's not quite into AI, it's the bits that lead up to AI. It's about how you find patterns in data. It's going to be a lot around visualization. It's going to be using tools like Python and R, for example. Okay, and you will also get, there also will be some specialist modules as well in terms of what are called monographic lectures on top of this as well. So everyone will be exposed to some AI, databases, software engineering, etc. A management module, And oh, you get to see me in the first time as I teach you cybersecurity. Okay? Just like defensive cybersecurity, guys. Defensive cybersecurity. I'm not going to teach you how to hack. All right? Not teaching that, but I'm teaching what. But everyone needs to do cybersecurity because it's much easier to build a secure system when you're building it than try to make it secure afterwards. Yes, I know the time. Yes, there's intruders. Okay, so then you've got the specialised subjects. That needs to, oops, that's the type. I just swap that one. So we're going to be looking at generative AI. We're going to teach concepts of programming in Python and techniques, deep learning, and also something called ML ops as well. We're going to teach that thing I talked about how we do that. So it's a much more practical way of actually building something. Okay. Now, if we then scroll up in terms of the topics and go to cloud computing, you have the same list of core subjects, but you end up having data processing in the cloud, AWS cloud computing, a module covering the practical issues of deploying in the cloud, and also Microsoft Azure. So what will happen in this is that you'll look more onto how you build solutions in the cloud, how you build. Now, this is an area that's booming because of AI. Because all that AI requires large amounts of compute, which is cloud providers, yeah? So the AI people write the systems, the cloud guys are those who are doing it. And here we go. The AWS cloud computing module will be aligned with the architecting of AWS course. So you can take the exam afterwards. We can't give you the exemption from the exam because that's owned by the company, but we can teach you the content. Yeah. And in terms of Microsoft Azure, AZ104 and AZ305. Again, so you can transition in. Now, why has this got its certifications and the AI one hasn't? The reason is there's no AI is tuned in for there to be any stable accreditation. The accreditations that are there are basically fluff. They're basically certificates. Then we look at IT project management. And this is about basically, this is again trying to produce people with a core knowledge of IT, because you need to understand what you're managing, right? Project manager here. You know, I've seen lots of project managers. Yeah. Sometimes what happens is because the IT hiring boom, you have people who worked in the office who managed to talk their way into becoming scrum masters, but they can't program or do any development, and they're screaming at the programmers, "Do scrum harder, make it more agile," and the programmers are going, "Yeah." You do need to have a grip on this. You don't have to be a technological expert. You do need to understand what you're building, right? You've got to talk to the programmers. You've got to also understand the business that you're dealing with. Now, apart from the stuff we said everyone's coming to do, we're also going to look at the specialised modules here, and we're going to basically cover an awful lot of methodologies. So the syllabus is broadly aligned to cover the core material for most of the certifications. So it's a springboard. If you then want to become certificated, you can. Okay. So this is it. In addition to that, if we go back here, yes, let me check. One moment, just swapping slides. Back on here. Here we go. 5 minutes left. Oops. You'll also will be required, there's two requirements also. You have to do an internship, an IT internship as part of your master's, okay? If you're currently working in IT, you can satisfy that requirement effectively by turning up, enrolling, seeing Anna, and getting your current job. What you've done in that job, filling that paperwork and handing. For those of you who haven't got an IT job yet, we have an internships officer who can actually help you with that process or in terms of securing an IT job. And also, because it's part of a degree, some of the difficult bureaucratic issues become less because it's part of the degree. Okay? The project, and also you have to do a final project, which is a substantial piece of work. Like I said, the second year of the master, you'll do a substantial piece of work, which you need to complete during the second week. It's an individual project. And just as a quick note, you need to pass all the other modules, including the internship, and pay your fees, very important, if you're to submit the project. Okay? So you'll do all these 4 modules and you'll do a project as well. Okay? Unfortunately, I'm running a bit over time, so I'm just trying to get through the rest because the next talk is waiting. So what next? If you want to do an English language master's, apply, submit your documents. Okay, there's a system. You log in, set up an account. Once they're approved, you pay the fees and sign the contract. For those of you who need a visa, that's the point where you apply for a D visa. Okay? And if you are needing to apply for a visa, engage an immigration lawyer or ASAP. You're going to need one. The government's changed the laws this year, and they're being very difficult. So the process is going to, so if you need a visa, the process is brutal and outside experience. However, remember, some of you are Polish, yes? You're on a visa, you're already on a visa, yes? That's fine, you can study it now. You can study. If you're here not going to manage TRC or a work TRC, yeah, come study, no problem. Just show us it. You're in the country already. What you do in your spare time, they don't care, right? You're fine. You're fine. So, but for those of you coming in from abroad, you'll need to get this stuff done as soon as you can. Once you've signed the contract, we then provide you with paperwork, which will be part of your visa application. Then you'll need to get the visa and arrive. Okay. Now, get one. I would possibly ask for personal recommendations within your nationality group. In other words, if you're from India, ask Indians who are in Poland already which immigration lawyer they used. Okay? Yes, okay, I'm finishing off. It's 10-2. That's it. And then once you've got that letter, once we issue and sign the contract, we'll be set up onto email and Teams when you sign the contract, and then I'll be setting up a Teams group which I'll be using for onboarding. Okay. Looks like the next group are waiting to come in. So are there any questions? I'll be available outside for the next 2 hours. So what I'd like to do is thank you all now. Okay? And if you give me 10 minutes to just do the handover with Mr. Potashnik, and then I'll be available for any questions you might have. Sounds good. Okay? So guys online, thank you very much indeed for your patience. Where you've got, oops. So guys, our session is now over, okay? So I'm going to stop the recording.